This is Han Solo, and I'm going to be keeping you company for the next few hours right here on the Midnight Shift.
It's time to BS.
Hey, Brian.
What's going on, buddy? How are you?
Dude, I've been trying to get you on this for what feels like 3 years. It's crazy.
Yeah. I remember before I had you on my podcast, Unfiltered Discussions, I remember you and I had talked back and forth, I think when I was doing Bleach Bros. And that was at least 2.5 years ago, if not longer. So you're probably right on the whole 3-year thing.
Probably. But how you been, bro? I mean, it's been forever. It's been a while since we really talked and stuff like that outside of like social media. Like, this is the first time we've really spoken in front of a camera since I was on your show. Yeah, and I listen to that every now and then.
That was a good episode. It was, and you know what? So from a former podcaster, okay, because I hung up the microphone and I'm just kind of doing guest spots right now. But from a former podcaster, it's hard to have a guest that you bond with without ever meeting, right? And that you have a wonderful discussion with without an agenda. And we had such a good conversation. You were able to share a little bit about yourself, your history, some of the things that you struggled with, some of the things that you were completely blessed by in life, which is like my favorite thing in the world, right? And we had a wonderful back and forth. Again, unscripted, unfiltered, just a nice conversation. So I'm really hoping tonight just extends from that. You know what I mean?
It really was a great time. So let me introduce you. So Brian Howard of B Word Media, former indie podcasting great. I will throw this out there. So Brian Howard, residing from over in Nevada, I'm gonna remember right.
And you said it correctly, my guy. Nevada.
I remember.
Phenomenal job.
Remember.
It's funny because we're coming out of political season. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but we're coming out of political season. And on social media, they do targeted ads. So if you're in a zip code or geographic or something, they'll do zip codes. And you can always tell who's funneling out of state money because they're like, so do you live in Nevada? Are you doing all this sort of stuff? And it's like, bro, you're not even from here.
It's like the whole Long Island thing to me. Like when people say like, oh, you're in Long Island. I'm like, no, it is on Long Island, you little demon.
Yeah, exactly.
You demon.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how have you been, dude? I mean, let's also understand that you did mention that you did hang up the microphone. You put it away. You're semi-retired from podcasting. But I mean, how have you been? I mean, since you've hung up the microphone.
Life has been amazing, actually. And that's no shot at podcasting. That's just a shot at investing in something that needed a little bit more investing at the time. So let me back it up just a tad. So I'd been in podcasting since 2020 or 2021. I don't remember when, but really kind of everybody in COVID got into podcasting at one point or another, whether they were a guest or a host or whatever. And so I had the Bleach Bros podcast with my best friend, Jake. I was producing the Hateful Gnomes Music Hut with Jake from the Bleach Bros and Gnome from Dads on Dayquil. I started my venture, Unfiltered Discussions, right in that same time. So at one point I was juggling 3 podcasts, and then Bleach Bros folded. Jake decided to get out of podcasting. The Hateful Gnome quasi folded, and then we brought in a secondary host for that. And so that kind of continued for a bit. And then while I was doing Unfiltered Discussions, I was really like missing the comedic podcast side of things, because that's what Bleach Bros was. It was like locker room talk, good old boy stuff. And so we created the Raunchy Regret podcast, and that was me and Gnome from Dads on Dayquil, BZ from Fraternize with These Guys, which was a retired podcast, and also the Stoned from Dads on Dayquil as well. So we were 4 former podcasters just getting back in for a final hoorah kind of thing, and that lasted for a year. And Unfiltered lasted for, I think, 3 or 4 seasons. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I had a lot of wonderful conversations on that. So to answer your question more specifically, I had never had a break, and also I had juggled multiple projects always.
Yeah.
And it was just time for me to step back, take a breath of fresh air. I can't tell you how many podcasters in the game I saw that got out of podcasting, back into podcasting, took a break, came back, did the Ross and Rachel thing for a bit. Like, I just needed to have a break. And so to answer your question more specifically, since then, I've gone on a health journey. I'm down about 70 pounds.
Woo!
I have really invested in the things that I've wanted to do. I've made sure that I'm taking time to go do fun things. So like this year just so happens to be the year of concerts. So I'm traveling all over the place for concerts this year. I have a girlfriend, which I didn't have before. So we're just doing the investment thing and the getting to know each other thing and all that sort of stuff. And so yeah, man. And I'm also working on my book. So
No kidding.
The premise of my book is I was a father at 17 years old, and I ended up getting custody of my daughter when she was, I don't remember, either at the end of 4th grade or going into 4th grade, and I raised her from then on. And so my story is about that, and it's quasi memoir, quasi like, I don't know, journal type thing, but I'm working on that right now, and I'm really hoping that by the end of the year I'm done with it, because I'd really like to get it out. I've talked with a lot of people, and they think that it would be a good thing for people to read. So I'm working on that. So like I said, man, they're very, very long-winded answer, but since podcasting's been done, I've shifted focus, and the work that I've been putting in has really been paying off in other areas.
That's awesome, dude. Like, seriously, that's really great, because we've all been through there. We've all been through those moments of we just feel the burnout.
Right.
Of doing something that we love to do, whether it's a job or a hobby, and then it no longer becomes a job or a hobby. It just becomes painful and time consuming. Right. And then eventually the burnout takes over, and then you start to question a lot of things. Like, when did you, I feel like you've answered this question before, but when did you get to that point of like, hey, this may not last much longer?
You know, I think it was a multiple things that influenced that. Jake and I, we're still best friends to this day. Like,
yep,
we got into it. We started talking about, we talk about everything, right? So what happened with 3-hour phone calls became recordings, right? So it was really easy for us to have the chemistry, really easy for us to start to do that. But when we started Bleach Bros, there was a lot of optimism on, hey, this might be something. We were getting a lot of feedback from people saying, hey, this is exactly what I want to hear in this market.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really anything of that sort. And so we were really captivated by that. And we're like, hey, you know, this is pretty cool. And then right in that same time, Joe Rogan ended up signing his $100 million thing with Spotify.
Yeah.
And all of us are like, holy cow, there's money in this thing. And so, you know, we really put a lot of work into that, but we both got burned out on keeping up with it, because creatively, some of our most successful episodes were sports. And like we had an annual Super Bowl episode that was top tier. It was so good. You could put it up there with ESPN radio or CBS radio, or like any of those. We had just a fun time. We get experts in, do the whole works. And we both really liked it, but we were also centered around comedy. So what we would try to do is collectively come up with, hey, what's the rundown this week? What's the rundown this week? What's the rundown this week? And ChatGPT wasn't really a thing. There wasn't anything that we can go, hey, you know, what are some ideas? Nor did we have the idea, hey, this week's your rundown, next week's my rundown, and try to go back and forth. It was more collective. So both of us just kind of had some creative differences. He wanted to go one way into hockey, And at the time, I wasn't a big hockey fan. Like, I knew nothing about it. And so I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about it. So I don't know what I'm going to bring to the table. And I really wanted to
Yeah.
go with movies and everything else. But long story short, again, long-winded.
No, you're
I
good.
think when that ended there, it was kind of one of my things like, oh, there's a space in this project that I'm missing with Jake. And I loved Unfiltered. Absolutely loved Unfiltered. Very proud of what I've done with Unfiltered. But it's a very serious conversation, and oftentimes people are talking about their traumas. And while I love hearing about it, especially the overcoming of traumas, it's a really heavy topic. And so as I'm recording, as I'm re-listening when I'm editing, as I'm re-listening to make sure that it's good product that's out, I'm constantly hearing things about people's traumas, or I'm constantly hearing things
Yeah.
about things and that put a weight on me that I wasn't aware of. And then
Really?
yeah, separately, I think I was missing my best friend. You know what I mean? And so, like, it wasn't podcasting as we knew it. And so, on top of all of that, the market became so saturated. Like, every celebrity got their own
Everyone
podcast.
has
Every
one.
sportscaster
Everyone.
has a podcast. Every influencer has a podcast. Realtors have a podcast. I mean, PR people have podcasts, and so it just kind of got saturated, and I started asking myself, hey, I'm putting all of this effort into a product. What's my return? And what I'm looking at is what my investment is that there was a lot of time within my week that was encumbered by the podcast, whether it doesn't matter what podcast it was. And then it's the time to record and the time to be creative with it, the time to do the social medias, all that sort of stuff. And the return wasn't the same optimism that we had when we got into it. You know what I
I hear
mean?
you.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
at that point, I met a lot of people in podcasting, still obviously love podcasting, listen to podcasts every day. But I had to take a break. I had to just step back and just reevaluate. And in the reevaluation process, I don't know if I'm going to come back, to be honest with you. But what I do know is that I appreciate it. I can do the guest circuit. I can bring topics to the table. I have good discussions with people depending on the topic. And so, I don't mind doing this type of stuff. But for now, it's definitely a break. And in turn, I'm seeing fruits in other areas of my life. So I can't argue with it. You know what I mean?
I hear you. And you mentioned your daughter before,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole journey and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that, your daughter was your biggest motivation and stuff like that? Because I'm sure there's a period of your life, especially at 17. Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a period of your life between 17 to your 20s where you're like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
I'm 17. I don't
You
know
and
what
I-
I'm going to do with, I don't know who I am. How did you, to cut you off? Sorry about that, but like,
That's
how
okay.
did you go from, holy crap, this is a huge obstacle, to all of a sudden, this is my greatest motivation?
So to answer that question, you have to understand, and your listeners have to understand, I was a child expecting a child, right? So at 17 years old, we think, everybody's been 17 before, we think we know it all. But when I was in school, and I'm a little bit older than you, we had movies in health class. And in health class, they were talking about sex ed and all this sort of stuff, and prophylactics and everything that you can do to avoid pregnancies, and safe sex and abstinence and everything of that sort, right? But there was a movie that they showed. The movie was janky. Okay, it was like done in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was a VHS tape back then, because that was still a thing, and it had the little lines going through it, right? So, but ultimately, the VHS tape was a boyfriend and girlfriend, high school age, that found out that they got pregnant. And what you see illustrated in the video was that the dad went to go work for fast food, and the mom went to go work for cleaning houses. And I'm not crapping on either of those two industries. You can make a ton of money in both, but I basically got out of that my future is going to be working in fast food. Like I have no life beyond that. And so when I found out that my ex-wife was pregnant, I instantly thought, well, there goes my life. And it was 2000 and I think it was 2002 when we found out. And I mean, September 11th had just happened. I was very much wanting to go into the military. Like that was my thing. That was my plan. My plan was to go into the Air Force. And so I had already talked with recruiters, all the things. I'd shaved my head, like the whole works, right?
Yeah.
And once they found out that I was having a baby, they basically said, hey, you probably shouldn't go in right now because, you know, we're at war kind of thing. You've got a baby. And I went, okay. And so I pivoted and I went, I got kicked out of the house. I went from living with my mom to living with my mom's mom to living with my dad to living on my own. I graduated high school early. I made sure to get that done. And I instantly went to work for fast food. Again, that's what I thought I needed to do. And so I went to work for fast food until I realized that the minimum wage that they were paying me wasn't going to cut it. I went to work for retail. I went into some sales. And then ultimately I went into banking. And I spent the better part of a decade plus 15 years, 18 years in banking. And now I work in finance for a state entity. But that being the case, it was a struggle, man. To answer your question again, more specifically, I was a child getting ready to raise a child. I didn't understand what was needed to raise a baby. I didn't know the cost of diapers. I didn't know the cost of rent. I didn't know the cost of gas to go to and from work. I didn't know that there were overdraft fees. I remember one time I had so many overdraft fees. I ended up I had this Coca-Cola bottle. It was a big bottle, okay, like a 3-foot tall bottle full of coins, okay? And I took it to the casino because we have casinos here in Nevada, and I got it cashed out, right? And it was like $400 or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a ton of money. And I deposited it in my bank, and I had almost $400 worth of overdraft fees. And
No way.
so I didn't have any money. Like once it was all done, I didn't have any money. These are the things that I didn't know, right? And so then you go, well, if the baby's crying, what does that mean? You know, is it hungry? Does she need to be changed? Does she have teeth growing in? Like you don't know any of these things, right? And so I graduated high school. I got married to her mom. She graduated high school, and then our agreement was, hey, you go to college, meaning her. You go to college, get your degree, and then I'll work. I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to do it. And that basically worked until she got her degree and we got divorced. So it is what it is, right? But it's
like a bowling ball. It's like a hit you in the face.
Indiana Jones, dude, straight up. And so
oh my god,
I had to deal with a lot of things. So not only was I a young dad, not only was I trying to raise a child, not only was I trying to do all of these things, I also had to figure out adult problems like divorce, adult problems like child custody, adult problems like child support, paying child support, right? So my story is very complicated when it comes to those because there's a lot of times that I can point out and say, I overcome this and here's how, or this was the struggle and here's what I faced and all the things. And I'll tell you, here I am today. My daughter is going to be 23 this year.
Woo!
I have zero regrets. I would do it all over again, as tough as it was. She's my everything. She is the literal best person in my life. She's an absolute sweetheart.
That's awesome, dude.
She just started her own business. She went and got her trade education.
I saw that. Good for her. Seriously.
Things, yeah, she's doing it. She is. And she's engaged. She's actually married next year. I like my future son-in-law. So things are good, man. So I feel like there's this story that impacts people, whether you know somebody who was a teenage parent, mom or dad, whether you have relatives who were a teenage parent, whether you're a parent and worried about the consequences of some of these things. I think that there's a lot of things that I can touch within this book that allow people to get a glimpse into my life, not for any sort of martyrdom or celebration. I just think that it's a good lesson to learn. And you know, you and I talked a little bit about like biblical stuff in your podcast, not saying that either of us are super religious or anything, but there's a term that they talk about in the Bible where Jesus would teach parables, right? And so parables is
Yeah.
basically a metaphor of, hey, I'm going to tell you, like, if you teach a man to fish, he'll fish the rest of his life. But if you give a man a fish, he's always going to come back for the fish, right? So it's a metaphor on an overall thing. And I think I have the ability to illustrate a lot of metaphors and lessons that I've learned throughout this journey. And whether anybody's impacted by teenage pregnancy or not, I think that people can still walk away with some lessons that I have to share.
Which was going to lead to another question before you went up and said, hey, I don't regret anything. Like, if you could go back in time and say, change one thing in your past. I asked this question here and then to certain people.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, where they feel some regret, or they feel some kind of like, oh my God, I wish I didn't do that, or blah, blah, blah. I asked this question because you mentioned that you don't have any regret. But if you could go back in time, not saying you would, if you could go back in time and change one thing in your past, what would it change? But before you answer, that thing made you the person who you are today. Would you still change it?
No. I think that there's some things that I would modify. I don't think that I would change things to change the outcome. Like, I'll give you an example, and then I'll answer the question again more specifically. But when my ex-wife, when I found out she was pregnant, I did the typical guy thing, okay? And I went, whose baby is it? Right? And she's like, it's yours. And I'm like, how do I know? Right? And all I was doing was trying to deflect the responsibility. I was scared, right?
Yeah.
And
Of
so
course.
in that, I was also a big proponent for abortion and a big proponent for adoption. Again, both, not for any other reason, was I was scared of the consequences. I didn't want to work fast food the rest of my life. I didn't want to know that my life was over at 17 years old, right? And so I was, for lack of a better word, a jerk, and I think trying to have an adult relationship with my ex, with her mom, became complicated because both of us didn't know our own responsibility within the relationship. Both of us didn't know the healthy boundaries and the healthy communication styles that I've learned since. Both of us didn't know what it was like to respect somebody. We felt forced to be together. Like, there was a lot of us.
Yeah.
There was a lot of our people that were saying, hey, you got to get married now. Hey, you got to do this. Hey, you got to do that. And we listened to a lot of them. And I think, should we have not done that and just been able to maintain a decent relationship, I think we probably could have avoided a lot of, court costs. I think we could have avoided, a lot of things like that. And really, I had to do a lot of maturing, man. I mean, I was not a nice person. Like, I thought I was everything in a bag of chips. And there were times that I was a jerk. I was rude, and I can acknowledge that now. And likewise, I have to give her the credit. She was a good jerk too. And there was, there's a lot of things that go to it. But I think for me, I wouldn't change anything, because I also have the fear of the butterfly effect. Like, you change one thing, and all of a sudden, like, next thing you know, you're like working in a factory in India or something. And I don't want to do any of that. So I would go through all the heartache. I'd go through all the heartbreak. I'd go through all the hard times. I'd go through all the financial difficulties. I'd do it all again, man.
Of course. I mean, you mentioned the butterfly effect and stuff like that. It's like, oh my God, like, all of a sudden it comes to bite me in the rear end. You know what I mean? I mean, I've been through that myself a few times, and I'm grateful for the people that I have and the people that I've gotten to know over the years and stuff like that. You're definitely one of them. And our episode of Unfiltered Discussions, I mean, I've done a few sit-down episodes in the past, but I never really got to sit down and just spew out everything or most of everything about, life. Right. And the thing that I try to tell people, like the whole BS sessions thing, is not just about, hey, this isn't a place for you to just spew out whatever. We're also here to have a comfort zone. This is a comfort zone in the end. Right. And we could crack jokes. We could drink some beers or whiskey or whatever, or wine, whatever you're into. Who cares? Right. But at the end of the day, if you're comfortable talking about whatever's on your mind. I encourage that, and I'm also proud of you for that because, you know, speaking from experience, that isn't an easy thing to do.
Right.
And especially going through the journeys that, you know, I've gone through, and especially you've gone through, we can all be proud of something and look back and go, you know what? I did that.
Yeah.
I did all that. And you did all that. Like, you should be, I don't know if, like, where the proudness level of you is in the regard. I'm pretty sure it should be, or pretty sure it is up there. Of, you know, holy crap, I'm proud of myself for doing everything I did.
This is what is it? Men's Mental Health Month, right now.
Sure. Yeah.
And I did a podcast last week, a guest spot on there. And we had touched on it briefly, right? And you know, men, there's different generations of men. Like, we think of men that served in World War II or World War I, very stoic. They never talked about the battles that they went through, both figuratively and literally. Mm-hmm. And you can see what effect that had on the Vietnam generation, really not being able to talk and dealing with, you know, post-traumatic stress and all of those things. And, you know, I think as generations have passed, I consider myself a Zennial. So I'm a millennial and Gen X. Same. I'm right on that border.
Like a dead smack in the middle.
Yeah. I'm for people that want to look it up, I'm the Saved by the Bell generation. Okay. And so
great reference for those listening.
Yeah. And so, you know, for me, while I acknowledge that I have feelings and whatever, I think for me, there's been more of a focus on mental health for the things that I've been through. I mean, I have a wonderful relationship with my mom. I love my mom to death. But when she kicked me out of the house, it was a really hard time for me to get past. And there's been certain things in my life, like with my mom or with my ex-wife or different people, that I've had to learn how to forgive. And I've said constantly on multiple platforms and in multiple modes that forgiveness is not for the person you're forgiving. Like, forgiveness is for you. Yeah. And so if you choose to forgive somebody, you are allowing the weight of the burden to leave. And you're saying, regardless of what happens next, I'm okay. And it doesn't mean you forget. It just means that you forgive. And so I've had to learn some things the hard way. And going back into the mental health part of it, that was one of the journeys that I had to take with mental health, was really going through the forgiveness pattern. I had to do some maturing. I had to take some accountability. And like I said, I didn't treat my ex-wife very well. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. And that being the case, you know, the consequence is what it is. And I can't change that, nor do I want to. But it has made me into a better man. And so I think the future generations, the Gen Zs, the Gen Alphas, the next one coming up.
I don't know.
I think that there's a very, very broad focus on mental health, which is good. I just think that there's potential to make it a crutch. And in my generation, it was like acknowledgement and move on, right? Whereas my dad's generation, we don't talk about it, you know, and his dad's generation, you never saw the man cry in his entire life. I have no problem shedding a tear if it's necessary. But I'm very much about handle your business, acknowledge what's going on. Like, if you're going through a circumstance, it's okay to feel a certain way. But you have to move on. You have to get the strength. You have to feel it. You have to go through that. And if for no other reason, you're going to be stronger on the other side. And that's like the biggest thing that I've learned going through this, is that, yeah, I've had struggles, but I have to get past it. My weight loss journey right now, right? Like, I'm making progress, but I have to be uncomfortable. I have to be okay being hungry. I have to be okay exercising. I have to be okay drinking water. Like, that's a hard thing, right? And so, you know, you have to be uncomfortable. And I got into the whole podcast thing as a fan of Joe Rogan, and I'm still a fan of Joe Rogan. And you know, one of the things that he says is he puts his body into submission. If for no other reason, then he needs his body to know that it has to be submissive to his mind. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I need to be okay being uncomfortable, and that's perfectly fine. And I think that's a good lesson for people to learn.
Be okay with being uncomfortable. That's a good one. That should be a t-shirt or a hat. Seriously, or a hat at this point. I mean, I'm going to go back to the very beginning. You know, you're 17, 18 years old. I mean, can you recall at a certain point where you were like, man, I'm considering, checking myself out. Has that ever crossed your mind and stuff like that at that point?
I went through really two really bad breakups. One with my ex-wife and then one with my ex-fiance. And in both of those, and I think you can probably relate to this, Dan, because we've talked about this before, but in each of these two relationships, and I've had other relationships since, but in each of these two relationships, I sacrificed myself so much for the betterment of the relationship, or what I thought was the betterment of the relationship, that at the end of it, I didn't even know what my favorite color was.
Wow.
Like, it got to that point, right? And so when I was married and we were going through a separation or divorce, either one, because we separated a few times, I remember that. So I didn't have any friends. I isolated myself from my friends because she didn't like them. I isolated myself from my family because she felt uncomfortable with them.
Yep, I've been through that.
And so I really was very independent, but I was codependent. Like, I was super dependent on her. And I remember getting out of that, and I went to a movie with my dad, and the movie we went to was Wedding Crashers. Okay, so we went in the movie theater. And the whole part where he's like, the whole motorboating part on the staircase, if you remember, he's like, you motorboater. And I laughed so hard. I found my voice. I found my laugh. And it sounds so stupid, okay? But I found my laugh. And I laughed so hard that even 10 minutes later, during the serious parts of the movie, I was still laughing. And the whole theater was laughing because I was laughing.
That's beautiful.
And so, I had to find myself, and not so much in the next one, but there were parts of it where I mirrored that. And I lost myself, and I was able to get myself back. And since then, I know healthy wise how much of me I can sacrifice. And I also demand that I'm going to be me. And like, there's things that you can do, right? Like, if you're I don't know, if all you're going to do is just sit on the couch and eat pizza all day, right? And your lady doesn't like it, then maybe that's the righteous thing for her not to like, right? But if you suffer from a medical condition and she tells you, well, you can't suffer from the medical condition anymore, like that, you literally can't stop that, right? So you have to understand a healthy balance of what you're able to put in and sacrifice and tolerate. And so I've learned that, and I found that in doing all of those different exercises and finding out more about me and my preferences and my likes and my warts and my faults and all that sort of stuff, I've been able to adjust my expectations. And I remember when I was going through it, I mean, I was in the thick of it, right? And I was going through this toxic relationship. My aunt, I talked with her a little bit, and she said, hey, take the person off the pedestal. And I said, what are you talking about? And she says, you have this person on a pedestal. Take them off. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, you're expecting the pedestal label. You're expecting the pedestal level of treatment. And you're getting your hopes up because you're expecting this high of a level. If you bring your expectations down, then when they meet your expectations, you're happy about it. But if they don't meet your expectations, then it's probably a minimal thing now. And you're just like, well, that doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And that took me a long time to learn, man. And I'll tell you what, I don't put expectations on people at all anymore, relatively at all anymore. And I feel blessed because of it, because I'm able to have wonderful relationships with a lot of people. And I don't care if they return a text. I don't care if they return a phone call. Oftentimes, the people that are in my life invest just as much as I do. So if I call them and they miss it, they're going to call me back. If they don't, I'm also not going to worry about it. But then eventually the phone calls stop, right? And then I'm also not going to worry about it, right? So it's one of those things in life that I've felt. I don't know what the right word is, but it's a maturing, right? Like you're understanding life more, and you're understanding the values more. And nobody has a secret of life, But the secret of life, I don't believe, is happiness. I think the secret of life is the ability to be content. I think if you're content with life, there is more value in it than if you're striving for a happy life. Because contentness, or I don't know if that's a word, being content can be able to deal with adversity, but also success, and having a positive reaction to both. And I think that that's more valuable than striving for happiness.
I had a coworker of mine at a previous employer who was an iron worker of 35 years, and he worked in New York City, he worked in Staten Island, he worked all over the 5 boroughs of Manhattan. And when I started there, I was a skittish little crap. Family show people. Now we are. But he told me is like, what are you so afraid of? What are you so afraid of? Are you afraid of, people not liking you? Or are you more afraid of you not liking yourself?
Right.
And I thought about it. I still think about that a few times. And I think being content with your life, being content with life in general, is such a huge thing, because we mentioned Men's Mental Health Month, or you mentioned Men's Mental Health Month. I think the whole idea, or the whole motive, or the whole drive of mental health awareness has sort of become a personality trait in that regard, which is kind of crappy to say.
Yeah.
But the more you see it all over, whether it's with friends on Facebook or Instagram or people on TikTok, and they'll use I'll use my diagnosis, a perfect example, the autism spectrum. Perfect example. People use autism as a personality trait, and will use mental health as a personality trait as a whole. It's kind of messed up, but they take it as, hey, this is just the way I am. Versus, hey, life sucks, but it doesn't need to be hard.
Yeah, there's a saying that I heard, and if I knew who said it, I would attribute it to him, but I'm just going to say that I said it because, haha. Victimhood without accountability is irresponsible. So if you're going to be in victimhood, and victimhood's multiple things, right? But if you're going to be in victimhood, if you're going to be a victim and you're not taking accountability, and it doesn't mean that you're at fault for the reason why you're a victim, but it means that you're not taking accountability for how you act or how you do things, then you're being irresponsible. And what I mean by that is, and I'll give you an example. My ex-wife and I already said it was a very toxic relationship. I very well could have blamed everything on her. And in the end, I had the custody of the kid. I have a wonderful relationship with the kid. I feel like I'm in a better position in life than she is. And I don't have to sit here and compare all of these things, right? And I'm not attacking her. I wish her the best. I absolutely do. But if I did all of that and I said, well, she's completely at fault. It's her fault. She's a bad person, all this sort of stuff. And I never took accountability. That is irresponsible of me. And the consequences of that can be major. So I have to acknowledge that I had faults. I had to acknowledge that I contributed to the demise of the relationship. If for no other reason, I have to be able to teach my daughter the lessons that I learned out of that, or hope to teach her the lessons that I learned out of that, so she doesn't repeat those same mistakes. Oftentimes, whether it be drugs, whether it be anger, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be whatever, you find that these things happen generationally, right? And so take a sexual predator, for example. A sexual predator is causing harm to somebody, right? They're completely changing and altering somebody's life in the worst way, okay? But this person could have also been a victim of sexual predators, and they could have dealt with that, and then this is their way of doing it, is because it's all that they know. I'm not saying that that's right, and I'm not advocating for that.
I see what you're saying.
But what I am saying is that if you do not heal from things, if you do not allow yourself to go through the motions of the healing, to talk with people, to understand why things are wrong, to make different choices, then you're going to repeat the same mistake and create new victims because you're not willing to take accountability. And that might be a bad example, but victimhood without accountability is your responsibility.
Of
And
course.
that's definitely something that I live by.
Of course. And, taking accountability for anything is huge, because it understands the whole phrase, it takes two to tango. Quite literally in that regard. We can all look back at some mistakes that we've made. I can talk to my fiance about mistakes that I made. There are some mistakes that I regret.
Right.
I'm sure we all regret a lot of things. I look back at a lot of everything. I can heal from, the mistakes. And I can also understand that, hey, I made those mistakes. Those people messed me up. But I can also acknowledge that I had some fault in those situations. And that's maturing.
Yeah.
And you can look at this society, generation, whatever the heck you want to call it, and say, maybe there's a maturing epidemic. It's not just a mental health epidemic, it's a maturing epidemic.
We live in the TikTok generation, man.
Yeah,
I have Instagram, right? I have Facebook, but I don't have TikTok. Now, I realize that Reels on Instagram are basically just TikToks, but I have to limit myself to how much access I have to things, because I can get down that rabbit hole and I can spend hours upon hours upon hours doing it, right?
I'm doing that too. I'm doing that too. I have, thank God for the MacBook, because I can put everything on here.
Yeah.
And I've considered deleting everything on my phone multiple times.
Yeah.
But I haven't really pulled the trigger and just go, you know what, screw it.
But the hard part is, and this will transition into something else too, but the hard part is that we live in a 3-minute generation. You have our attention for 3 minutes max. And if we don't like what we hear within that 3 minutes, we're going to flip to the next video, or we're going to flip to the next thing that's going to gather our attention. And it's made our relationships very shallow. It's made our relationships very surface level. And instead of having full-on conversations as we're doing here on BS Sessions or Unfiltered Discussions or any of the other great podcasts that have long-form discussions, we relegate our communication to 3-minute clips. And that's a sad thing, because what happens is that that's our experience. Our experience is 3 minutes at a time. And there's nothing valuable enough where you can walk away feeling accomplished in 3 minutes.
Nope.
Unless it's, 3 minutes to talk yourself out of a bad decision, or, something stupid like that, right? So what it's done, though, is we've created a generation of quick hits and do whatever feels good. And going back to being uncomfortable, you have to make decisions that are uncomfortable in order for you to mature. You have to make decisions that are uncomfortable in order for you to grow. And you have to make decisions that are uncomfortable in order to invest in the people around you. I mean, you have a wonderful lady in your life. And if all you gave her was 3-minute attention every single day, you wouldn't have a wonderful lady in your life. You have to make the investment, right? And so that being the case, it is one of those things where you have to be able to take the accountability, and you have to do that. And a good example of that is, and it's not just in life, it's also in business. A good example of that is that movie theaters, right? Everybody used to buy movie tickets. And I remember back in the day, and I don't know if you remember this or not, I remember back in the day, we didn't have like assigned movie seats, right?
I remember that. Yeah.
The Dark Knight came out. Okay.
Oh.
2009, 2008.
2008. Yeah. I love
the
that
Dark
movie.
Knight came out. I had 10 buddies go with me. So 11 tickets, right? 11 tickets. And what we had to do was we had to get in there early. And mind you, this was in between movies. So we had to like stand in line, get in early, save the seats for the people who weren't there. And then you get everybody yelling at you and all this sort of stuff, right? Well, now streaming has become so available and routine and regular that movie theaters aren't really a thing anymore. And what's going to happen is that movie theaters, mark my words, probably the next 20 years, are not going to be a thing. And I don't know if on Long Island where you're at, they have A&W restaurants, but A&W, at least here on the West Coast, they were like they used to rollerblade out or roller skate out your meals right to the
like
car.
Sonic, like very similar to Sonic.
Very similar to Sonic, yeah. And
we have Sonic over here, but
Sonic doesn't, at least here, Sonic doesn't do the roller skates anymore. Like it's not a thing, right? So and so it's, you take away these drive-ins or these, whatever you want to call them, the drive-in diners and stuff. Like there's seasons for things. And like the record player right now, like people want to buy vinyls and want a record player. I wish I still had the vinyls that I had. I had this wonderful vinyl. It was a Cheech and Chong vinyl. It was the funniest thing.
Crap.
It was the funniest thing, dude. I would turn it on and I was listening to Cheech and Chong walking through the forest, right? So they had the sound effects like crunch, 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 crunch. And you hear I think it was Cheech, and he goes, "Hey man, what's that?" And Chong goes, "I don't know, man, but that looks like crap." And he's like, "Oh man, you gotta figure it out, man, because we don't want to walk in crap." He's like, "Okay, I'll touch it." And you hear, and he goes, "Man, it feels like crap, man." He's like, "Oh man, you gotta smell it, man. We gotta make sure." So you hear that, and he goes, "Oh man, it smells like crap, man." He's like, "Man, you gotta taste it, man. Like, we don't want to walk through this." And so you hear that, and he goes, "Oh man, that tastes like crap, man." He goes, "All right, man, let's walk around. We don't want to get crap all over us." Like, comedy beyond comedy on vinyls, right? So my point is that like what is nostalgic now didn't matter at one point, right? Like people were throwing it away. And that's what I feel like happens with our attention span. Like we're throwing things away now that because we're thinking it doesn't matter, but it really does. And what is that we're throwing away? Like, are we throwing away the values of parenthood and teaching our kids things? Are we throwing away the values of a healthy relationship and taking for granted of our spouse or significant other? Are we taking it? Are we getting rid of the morals and the foundations that we have, whether it be religion, whether it be politics, whether it be whatever, because it doesn't feel good or it's no longer relevant in our life? And is that tossing it away ruining our short-term history books to the point that the next generation is going to do with that? So again, victimhood plus lack of accountability equals irresponsibility, and the next generation is always the one that's going to feel it.
It's unfortunate because, going back to the whole men's mental health thing, it's unfortunate because, men are also blamed for a lot, and the whole accountability thing comes into play. It's like, sometimes men are responsible for their own crap. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're not. I mean, I've taken responsibility for a lot of mistakes in my life and stuff like that. And going back to and pivoting to the relationship factor, the next generation after you and I get older, when we're in our 40s or our 50s, and we look at the next generation of children, the next generation of teenagers. And it's unfortunate because I was listening to a podcast, one of my favorites ever, the Freedom Friends podcast, and highly recommend. They're hilarious. And one of the hosts goes, I was at a bar with a buddy of mine, and he goes to talk to this girl. He's a relatively good looking guy. He's in his early 20s, smart dude. Great job, great gig. And the lady basically looks at him and goes, like the whole swipe left thing, like you see on Tinder. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the host basically tears her a new a-hole and goes, "What in the hell, the literal hell are you doing? You have a guy who's willing to approach you, go out of his way to approach you, and you go swipe left on him because you think you are better than that." Mm-hmm. It's a shame.
Yeah, you actually brought up the topic that was going on in my mind as I finished my last statement, and that is the online dating. I don't know if you've been on online dating.
I met her through there. I met her through Facebook dating, funny enough.
Fantastic.
It's
but again, going
story,
back into the what we do for convenience. The one thing, and so I get a couple benefits, right? So I have some lady friends that are dating, and you know, they're telling me their experiences and stuff. And then I have also gone through my own dating experience on online dating. So men, we're again very surface level. We don't put a lot of things on there, but we're always tryhards to a certain level, right? And our for some reason, anybody who fishes like holds a fish up in their profile picture, and that's like an instant turn off for a bunch of women.
The whole fish thing is a running joke with her.
Yeah, it's incredible. But on the man side of things, it's if you're a Democrat, don't approach me. If you're a Trump supporter, don't approach me. If you're, you know, under 5'10", don't approach me. If you're like, there's a lot of really, really good people that are slightly off from what you're looking for, or slightly off from what your qualifications are, that could probably be an amazing partner, but you're instantly getting rid of everybody because you're saying
Yep.
that. And so going back to the expectations, like when you're saying,
"Oh, just gonna mention that your
don't-
expectations are too high."
yeah, and what's happening is that you're blocking yourself, is who you're blocking.
Yeah, you are.
And for men, that's a real thing, because I heard a statistic that, like, for every like that a man does on Tinder, I don't remember if it was Tinder, but I'm going to use Tinder as an example. For every like he sends, a woman has 5 times as many likes in her likes than because men don't, like, we used to be, hey, I want to ask you out on a date. Hey, I want to do this. Let me give you an example. So my girlfriend now, we were really good friends before we decided to make a commitment, right? And one of the things that we really bonded over was music. And so she likes country music, I like country music, and she likes other music, I like other music. But George Strait has this song. It says "Check Yes or No," right?
I
And so
love that song.
it's a great song, right?
Love
And
it.
so on the flip side, because we were so close and never made a commitment, and you know, never really did anything, you know, there was another song, kind of a recent song, by Lee Brice, and it's called "Rumor." And it says, "There's a rumor going around about me and you, going around the town, basically, and do you want to make it true?" Right? And so when I asked her out, I did, you know, we had flirted back and forth and all this sort of stuff. I decided I was wanting to write her a letter and incorporate both of those 2 lyrics into my letter to ask her out. You know, there's a rumor going around and blah, 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 and check yes or no. And so it's funny because she got that. And of course, you know, instant butterflies and all the things.
I love
And
that.
then she told me she got the letter, and so of course now I'm nervous, like, what's she gonna say? Did I step out of bounds? Like, whatever. And then
like,
she ended up
like, crap.
she ended up responding with a letter of her own, and so it was very snail
That's
mail, like
great.
asking out. Like, a lot of times people would probably ask people out through text message, right?
Yep.
And I think that it's a good thing when you're talking about all of this, because you're now expressing that you're going back to some chivalrous ways. Like in my, and I don't know when you graduated high school, but when I was going through high school, we passed notes. We didn't have cell phones. Like, so we would fold little origami notes and all these sort of things, and
That's
pass them
great.
back and forth in the hallway and do all this sort of stuff. And so it captured kind of that nostalgia with it, you know, and it's something kind of stupid, but it was meaningful to the both of us.
Yeah.
And that being the case, you know, you have to do things sometimes that are out of the ordinary to do that. And you know, I just think that it's something that's going to go away from the future generations, and I hope we bring it back. I really do.
I ever told you this story of how me and my fiance first met?
Yeah.
I did tell you this story, how I showed up on our first date bald.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you did.
So for the listeners out there, a quick little origin story. So we met on Facebook dating, and we met at a coffee shop. We officially met at a coffee shop over in this small little, you know, on this main street town over here in Long Island called Patchogue. And this little coffee house was named Coho, is, you know, abbreviation for coffee house. The day before I was supposed to meet her, I decided to shave my head out of the blue. I don't know why. I just thought, hey, maybe this is a good idea. It's hot. It's in the middle of summer. It is hot. Not the smartest thing I've ever did, but I mean, if she hasn't caught on by now that I'm a effing weirdo, I mean, you know, yay. She's got, I mean, I have a silicone band on my finger. She's got her engagement ring on her finger. And if she hasn't figured it out by now, I don't know what to tell you. But
That's it.
I basically, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I kind of went into it with the idea of I'm just going to be myself. And in high school, especially, we're all stupid. Like, let's just be honest here. We all try to be someone that we're not. Let's be real here. We all try to be someone that we're not. And if I could give, anyone, quote unquote, advice, it would be don't try to be someone that you're not. Just be who you want to be.
Yeah.
Which in kind of retrospect doesn't make a lick of dang sense, but regardless, if you want to be, for God's sakes, a country singer or an astronaut or a Jedi Knight for all I care, go do that. Cosplay exists. Go do it. And I think we latch onto this whole mentality of, hey, I have to be this type of person or I'm a failure.
I think it's a beautiful thing to ask yourself what type of person you are and get to know yourself and get to know your flaws and get to know your traits that are wonderful and all of those things. Because if you do that, you're going to find that there's a very, very good chance that the person who you're portraying or thinking that you are might not be the person that you are. And so you talked about high school, right? So in high school, I was a jock. I was friends with the stoners. I was friends with the nerds. I was friends with everybody, right?
Yeah.
But I could fit. I was kind of a chameleon. I could fit in any friend group. And then what I've found as I've grown older is that I don't covet people's like appreciation or relationship or want to be in my life. Like if the people who are in my life that matter the most to me are the people who invest in me. And the investment can be just a, hey, how are you? Or, hey, I'm thinking about you, or, hey, all of this sort of stuff is going on. And I think that is the best part about it. It's wonderful because you have that. But right now we have so many influences and factors in our life, whether it be politics, the news,
TikTok, Jesus.
TikTok, social media. You have people's perceptions of certain things. Like you can, and the news is probably a really good example of this, but you can log on to Fox News or MSNBC and they'll report on the exact same story and it's two different perspectives. And the one thing on the last podcast that I was on that I kind of had a little rant session about was that I don't like the term "my truth." So I hear that.
I feel that
kind of like a thing now. People are like, "Well, I'm going to say my truth." Well, so's Puff Daddy, and he's going to say whatever he's going to say on the stand to avoid jail, right? So my truth,
a great example.
my truth doesn't mean anything. The truth means something. The truth matters. Yeah. And so I there's certain things, and that's kind of like this, and I'm not bagging on the new generation. I was a kid once too, but like there are things like this my truth thing or I'm a victim or whatever. It's okay. Yeah. You have a hard time. You were dealt a bad hand. But in poker, you can bluff and you can still win the entire pot. Mm-hmm. And so it's not the bad hand's fault. It's how you deal with the bad hand. That is the moral of the story. And so going back into it, I don't in high school is a weird age because we're all trying to figure each other out. We're all
my God.
We're trying to be liked. We're trying to do all the things. And even college age and even in your early 20s and all that sort of stuff. And I think I probably got to the point when I was like in, I don't know, mid 30s. I just went, I don't care. I don't care.
I had this running joke. I had this running joke to cut you off. I feel bad because I keep cutting you off, but I had this running joke that how do you know how people like you when you don't even like yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, how do you know what people like about you if you don't even like yourself? And you're in high school. You don't even know who the hell you are by the time you're 17 or 18 years old.
Yeah.
Like, most people don't know who the heck they are by the time they're 25.
The internet was a thing kind of when I was in high school. Like we had chat rooms and stuff, like the AOL chat rooms and whatever.
Yeah.
But we did not have the amount of access today with YouTube and podcasting. I mean, it's so easy to do. Uploading videos on TikTok, social media. I didn't have any of that. And it was still tough. I just think it's now more complicated. And I think that now we live in a society of victimhood and rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who have been victims of a lot of different things, and some things they'll talk about, some things they won't talk about. And I think that the biggest victim mentality we can give ourselves is just constantly say we're a victim. Because I think, yeah, you can acknowledge that something bad happened and you can acknowledge that there's something that maybe weighs you down. But the moment you identify yourself as a victim, the moment you don't identify yourself, like, let me give you an example. There was somebody I know who went through a pretty traumatic experience, and they didn't call him a victim. They went to a support group. They didn't call him a victim. They called him a survivor. Yeah. And if you think about the tone of it, when you say you're a victim, you're beat down. You're not worthy. You're no longer the same person that you were. You're now challenged. It has such a negative context. Whereas if you say you're a survivor, or you're a winner, you conquered. Now it's positive. Now you've proven that you can get past it. Now you've proven that you have the strength. Now you've proven that you're worth something. And I love that they did that. And I love that that was something that they were able to express and share, because I'm a survivor of teen pregnancy. Okay. I conquered teen pregnancy. I was not a deadbeat dad. I did not give up the rights as a father. I became an amazing dad. I have such a wonderful relationship with my daughter. I tell you, and I said this more and more, she is my biggest fan, and I'm her biggest fan. I mean, we have the most excellent relationship.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have done that if I'd have played the victim card and said, well, the best I can be is this. No, the best I can be is whatever I'm going to make it, and that's going back to the book that I'm completing. That's my overarching moral, is that you can be whatever you want to be. I hate to have like the army saying there, but you really can. It takes grit. It takes work. It takes tears. It takes blood. It takes sweat. There's a lot that goes into it, and you can really achieve whatever you want to achieve. I'm not saying that everybody born has the ability and the resources to be the president of the United States at some point. That's obviously a big feat. But there are things that you can accomplish. And it can start with, maybe you're the president of school. Maybe you're the president of a nonprofit. Maybe you work your way up and you find out that you don't want to be president at all, and you say, F that, and you're on to the next. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do, but your life is one of those things where you have control of it. And for people who don't feel like they have control over their life, they're not wearing the right pair of glasses.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I mean, I could speak about her as a perfect example. I mean, she conquers my fiance. I call her my wife, even though we're not technically married yet, but I have the privilege of calling her my soon-to-be wife. She deals with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but she's a conqueror of that. She finds ways each and every day to go and basically give that crap the middle finger and go, as much as the headaches bother me, the tiredness bothers me, as much as the joints, everything against me bothers me, I'm still going to find ways to keep going.
Right.
And, she's my biggest supporter. I'm her biggest fan. And she's in my corner each and every day. I'm in her corner each and every day, pumping her up. You got this, babe. You got it. And she's probably passed out of sleep right now. I don't give a crap. She's my champion. That's my champion. And she's having such a hard time keeping the picture of that dang dress away from me. She's so bad at keeping secrets. But, when that day comes, that scared little 10-year-old boy who all he wanted was to find, someone that genuinely gave a crap about him, when it was such a hard time for people to really give a crap about him or to see the benefits of him just being around.
Yeah.
All that weight's going to get lifted off.
Yeah.
When she walks down that aisle. And
Right.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait for that. And, you know, it feels like all that weight of you with your daughter, when you walk her down that aisle, is going to get lifted off of like all that pain, all that struggling from the age of 17 going forward. 20 something years later, I get to watch my baby girl
Oh yeah.
walk down the aisle. Oh man.
Oh, it's gonna be beautiful.
I can't wait for you, bro. I can't wait
It's
for
gonna
that
be
for
beautiful. I'm excited for it. You know, I had an agreement with her because, you know, I've been very open about being a teen parent, the struggles and all that sort of stuff. And it's really hard telling somebody who's 15, 16, 17, you know, hey, you don't need to go out and be promiscuous. You know, you don't need to go and do all of these things. I know all your friends are doing it. I know blah, blah, blah. It's really hard to have those conversations,
course.
especially being somebody who did it themselves. But we had an agreement. I said, no grandbabies until I'm 40. And she goes, oh, okay. And so, you know, now she's talking marriage and children in the somewhat near future, few years and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I'm just really excited to see what happens with life. I'm really excited to see what happens with her and me getting healthier and doing the things for me ensures that I'm going to be around to see it.
Hell yeah, my man. So with that being said, well, let's close up shop. So my friends, thank you so much for tuning in to BS Sessions Volume 49 featuring Brian Howard, B-Word himself. Where can they find you, bro?
They can find me on Twitter or X, I suppose, on Instagram. Those are my public profiles at bword BWORD 1011. Check out previous episodes if you're interested of Bleach Bros Podcast, of Raunchy Regret Podcast, Unfiltered Discussions. Make sure to check out the episode with Dan Cruz, aka formerly known as Daniel
Yeah.
Smooth. And you know, just you know, if you like my work, there's plenty of it. And if you don't, that's fine too. But yeah, when the book comes out and everything goes, I'll make sure to let you know, and you can let your audience know, and we'll go from there.
Oh yeah, my man. So my friends, my name is Dan Cruz. I'm coming to you from the beaches of lovely Long Island, New York. From B-Word, from the great state of Nevada. Or Nevada. Close enough. I had it the first time. I got it the first time.
You did have it the first time.
I had it the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all in this life and most certainly the next one. Cheers, everyone.